I'm bringing you my honored guest, Peter Blum, and we're going to have an episode today where we talk about good vibes because if anyone knows something about good vibes, it is my friend, Peter Blum. Peter, so thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm so happy that we got to have this time, got to make this time for this conversation today. Um, do you do you want to tell everyone a little bit about which came first, the hypnosis or the sound healing?
My involvement with sound and music goes back to when I was an infant. I grew up
Hmm.
in a musical household. I was very fortunate. My dad was an operatic baritone, and we had a piano, and my parents sang show tunes together, and we had the radio station of classical music on all the time. So music was and still is, but certainly predated anything else. And
That makes sense. That makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense. That's something that we share too. My parents were both music majors, and um my dad played in a symphony when I was growing up, and we all took music lessons. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
fascinating. I mean, I've told this story of going. I was basically bored. I'd go to hear my dad perform, and it was kind of exciting because there was my dad up on stage dressed as a Renaissance musketeer or a clown or some Birdman and Mozart magic flute. I mean, amazing costumes. But I'd sit there as a 5 or 6 year old for a couple of hours, and they'd be singing in Italian or German, and it was kind of boring. I didn't know what they were saying, and
Yeah. So
but
yeah.
and going backstage and watching my dad, this guy who wore a seersucker suit and carried a briefcase, on his day job,
Hmm.
transform with makeup and costume was very magical. And way later, when I learned about shape shifting, which is a
Ooh,
shamanic
shapes.
attribute, I was like, oh, he was shape shifting,
Yeah, he
right?
was
Yeah,
shape shifting.
yeah.
I love that. I love that.
So anytime that we put on a costume or a different outfit, like maybe when you get dressed to go to the office to do your clients or on Zoom, whatever, you put on different jewelry or makeup. And I have, when I do sound events, I have my performance clothes. And when I change into them, it changes my outlook and my perspective and my sense of who I am.
It changes your state.
Yes, very
I
much.
read a study that people that take tests wearing lab coats do better.
Lamb coats.
Lab
Oh,
coats, like a
lab
scientist.
coats.
If you
I
dressed up
thought
like a
like a
scientist,
coat made of lamb skin. No, a
lab.
lab coat. Yeah, could be. Yeah,
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 because it makes you think, oh, I'm smart. You associate scientists with being smart. So
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, makes sense. Sure.
yeah. Um, okay, so there was something that you said a little bit earlier about singing in a different language that I wanted to draw out. Because I know that we spoke about this a little bit on the phone
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
about like mantras
That's right.
and
Yeah, yeah,
singing and chanting in different languages. It might be a little bit of an acquired taste, but you said that you'd done some research into that.
yeah. First of all, I want to differentiate between the experience of a 5 or 6 year old child
Mm-hmm.
who's sort of like stuck in this place where he can't leave, and
Yeah, he's not opting into
it's
it.
right, right, right. I mean, and an adult who is pursuing chanting a mantra, which for those listeners or viewers who are not familiar, is a Sanskrit word. that literally, I think it is called, it means protection for the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the use of certain syllables or words or phrases that are intoned audibly, usually, um, for the purpose of meditation or invoking a particular state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
You do it with an intention, right? And I once saw Swami Satchidananda, who was a very famous teacher of yoga. He was the yogi at the Woodstock Festival, Swami
Mm-hmm.
Satchidananda, and he was one of the first Hindu yoga teachers to come and make a big splash. And I heard him talk, and he said, "If my mantra is Coca-Cola, then that's my mantra."
I love that.
Well, yeah, because we sort of there's an ascribing of magical qualities to certain words and sounds. And although, yes, I do teach that the correlation between certain sounds that we make and certain qualities, um, a lot more of it is the what you're thinking the effect is than the actual right sound.
Yeah, what the intention is when you're doing it.
Yeah.
I think about that when I think about, I don't know if you use EFT or tapping, like,
No, but I
that's
know
like
what it is. Yeah. Sure.
but I have noticed that some of my clients, not all of them, but some of them, they get more out of it when we're in session together than when they do it at home. And I'm just thinking maybe that just has to
Yeah.
do with just kind of their frame of mind when we're working together.
Right. Right. So I because I've been involved with these different mantras and studied them and tried to learn about them from coming from different cultural matrices, different spiritual traditions. Like I have these wrist beads.
Yeah, the prayer beads.
Yeah, yeah, and this is I wear on my wrist. There's 27 of them, which the magic number is 108.
Hmm.
I don't know, why, but that comes up over and over again. So
Hmm.
if you wear a lengthy, like around your neck, there'll be 108 beads plus a little counter bead that is doesn't count. But that's when you reverse direction, and as you're chanting, you're fingering each bead, and then when you get all the way around, and you never cross the center bead. So when
Okay.
you get all the way around, you reverse direction, you go back the other way. So 27 is times 4 is 108. So that's why it's
Yeah.
less clunky to have 27 around your wrist. But I've just gotten in the habit over years and years. I was watching these monks that I have a lot of respect for, these Tibetan Buddhist monks, and they've always all very often have this in their hand as they're talking to you, as they're doing something else. There's a part of them that is always doing this, and the mantra that I use most frequently is Om Mani Padme Hum, Om
Hmm.
Mani Padme Hum, which is a kind of like the national anthem of Tibetan Buddhism, and so I might be like even in session with somebody, and it's getting a little hairy, and
Hmm.
and I'll just take this off, and it's a centering. It's become an anchor for me over the years. Okay, this is what I do. Some people, like cut themselves to soothe themselves, or bite their nails, or whatever, smoke a cigarette. This is less harmful, and for
Yeah.
me, yeah, it is like okay, it keeps me centered on a certain in the background,
Hmm.
and I have to be careful that it doesn't take over the foreground of my consciousness, because I definitely want to be present for my client and paying attention to who they are and what's going on. But it's sort of like a background that's there all the time. That's going on of this. Oh, money, baby,
Yeah, I do.
right? And so yeah,
Yeah.
right. So that for me is a practice that I have been using for decades, and I recommend to people that they experiment with different ones and find, I'm what they call a Jubu, which is a born Jewish practicing Buddhist. So, so in the Jewish tradition, we use the word the Shema is
Mm-hmm.
the holiest prayer. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echud. That was something I heard in temple, and it means, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And but if you kind of contextualize it and make it more contemporary, it's just, listen, people of my tribe, there's only one divinity.
Yeah.
So this was a monotheistic thing when coming out of a time of many, many different deities, and they were like, no, it's just one.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not even sure that that's true. I think the one and the many are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I would agree with you
Right?
there. I
Yeah.
would agree with you there.
Thank you.
And I also think that there are multiple ways of interpreting some of those same words. So it kind of circles back around to what you were saying about how your intention in repeating that mantra also matters.
Totally, totally. So, the meaning of the words, and I found some writings by some of the great mystics. I don't know if I sent you one or not, by John Blofeld, where he was talking to this person about, not understanding. He was living in China, and he heard a mantra and he didn't know the meaning of the words, and it was finally, it was explained to him that it was might actually get in the way more if his conscious mind was thinking of the meaning.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of better to make the sounds and get lost in the sound with the
Yeah, just getting
idea
lost
of,
in the
yeah,
sound because when you're lost in the sound, also that makes your mind open to receiving information too. Sometimes you'll get like an answer or you can hear some sort of internal guidance that can happen when you get into that meditative state.
yeah. I for the first half of, I don't know, first 20 years of my life, I thought I was an atheist. And
Hmm.
then for the next 20 years, I think I thought I was an agnostic.
Hmm.
And now and then I got ordained as an interfaith minister, and it would be a little bit hypocritical, you know. Eh, So I I definitely connect with spirit, and when I teach, which I've been doing for 30 years, training other people in hypnosis, which I love, almost as much as doing one-on-one sessions. And I've trained hundreds of people, and I frame it for them. I say, for me, it is a spiritual art form.
Yeah, I would
That
agree with you.
there's a spiritual component to it, and not everyone does agree with us. Marian, there are a lot of people in our field who are clinicians and who actually want to distance what they're doing and make it more scientific and say, let's not get all involved with that woo-woo stuff. You
Yeah,
know?
I've struggled with that a little bit in the last couple of years, just trying to figure out how to be authentically myself. And to be fair, I see when I kind of survey, like, what all is out there in terms of spirituality, there are spiritual teachers and teachings that make me feel uncomfortable too. And so there's part of me that wants to distance myself from that. Like, I don't want to be the sort of religious leader that imposes my ideas or makes anyone feel ashamed of who they are or says that my way is the only way or tries to hold myself up as someone who has special access to something
Right.
that other
Or
people
like
don't have,
like
you know?
someone who calls himself emperor of the universe. Like, what would you do with a person like that?
Yeah, right? So, so I have been trying to find my way and trying to figure out like how to kind of communicate that
Yeah.
like, spirituality is a part of my life. It's something that I embrace for myself and just how to hold that with my professional life because generally in my hypnosis hat, I'm just pretty neutral.
Are you? Well, I am careful not to lay a particular trip on my clients, right?
Yeah, that's important.
My beliefs are my beliefs, and they inform my approach, but they don't have to be. I don't have to be wearing beads and feathers when I'm working. I mean, sometimes I do, but I'm just saying that I want to meet. You know the old knock knock joke. Knock knock. You have to say who's there.
Hmm. Yeah.
No, knock knock.
What?
It's
No, what was
a
it?
knock knock joke. Knock knock, and you say who's there.
Who's there?
Beware.
Beware who?
Beware your client is.
Oh, I love that. That's so good.
So
Yeah, beware. Beware your
we
client
need
is. Yeah, exactly.
we
Meet
need
them where they
to
are. Because that's the
meet
only
them where
place that
they
they
are.
can be. That's the only
Right.
place.
I mean,
Um,
I have people who come in who are born again, devout, born again Christians. I have this one guy, and he's a friend, and he runs a tattoo parlor, and he came to me several times to stop smoking,
mhm.
and he said to me, Peter, Jesus worked through you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who am I to say no? I
Yeah.
wouldn't ever say that, but if that is comfortable for you to feel and you got the results you're looking for,
Oh, totally.
then
I will use
yeah,
that if that is in their world. I've had I've had some strange experiences. I had a Jewish woman say, "Hey, man, like I don't even believe in Jesus," and he showed up in my hypnosis session
there you
because
go.
she
Yeah.
was like, "I'll take it. He wants to help me. I'll let him." I didn't mention him. It was just something that her own subconscious mind generated. Um,
Isn't that interesting how these things, the Jean Houston, you know her work? Jean Houston, she had Dramanon Mystery School for a while. You know her work? Who's um, anyway, uh, she talked about the levels of mind, that there's a level of archetypes
yeah,
and right and
yeah.
symbolism
I believe in the archetypes. Yeah, and so
and
that's the thing is I think that that's where we get stuck when we talk about religion and spirituality is that a lot of the things that make sense from the archetypal level need to be translated when they come down to what it actually means for our lives. And they almost have their own logic, you know? So, the subconscious mind its language is symbols and images and archetypes and I don't know, it's just interesting. It's interesting to think about and yeah, I
well,
mean I think that
you want to find out what the predominant symbolism and archetypes are that your client world is populated by, and
right,
work with them. Um, it doesn't matter if I believe that people have angels around them. I mean,
totally,
I happen to believe that, but I'm even not even sure what that means. But I
right,
believe I choose to believe that we're not in this alone,
totally.
right? One
I
of the
have
big awakenings for me, yeah.
I don't know if you saw this, but I updated the cover photo. um Stephanie says that's awesome. I'm not sure what moment that came in, but I just saw that. Um, I have updated your cover photo for this, where it is the Temperance card in the tarot, which is the
Oh no,
angel.
I did.
Yeah, I was
I
seeing. Well,
saw the picture of me holding the book. No, but you updated it. Okay.
yeah, the Temperance
Well,
card.
if you're working with the tarot, then you're in the world of archetypes
Yeah,
right away. Yeah.
yeah. I play with the tarot every day. I like it as a way to
Mm.
talk to my subconscious mind, and anyone else
Yeah.
that wants to be talking to me too.
So I pass this along. I have a couple of grandchildren, and when one of them was around 3 or so, he was spending time with me, and he would say to me, oh, I need help, and it would be something simple like, getting the lid off of a jar, or, of course, I help them. And
Mm-hmm.
after a while, I realized I need to remember to ask for help more often,
Yeah.
because I tend to come from a place of self sufficiency. I got this. Not that
Mm-hmm.
it's a sign of weakness to ask for help, but my first go to is, like, let me figure this out on my own. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes hours later, I'm like, I could have just looked online. I could have called somebody. I could have asked for help. So, it's a good reminder. It's a good reminder to me, from his place of innocence. There's
Mm-hmm.
no big deal. I need help. So, and the second thing that goes along with that is a core belief that help is always available,
Yeah,
right?
for
And
sure.
sometimes that's the most broken thing, in a sense, about some of our clients. Is the most saddest thing is they feel they're beyond hope and beyond help,
Yeah.
right? And we have to, if we can, kind of encourage them,
Yeah.
right?
I've found that when I take a moment to connect to my higher self and my guidance and my client's higher self and their guidance, then everything goes so much better. It's so much
Yeah.
easier. And also the simple act of paying attention to their higher self helps it I think it helps them to see that part of themselves more easily. And in
Now,
fact, I've had, marriages saved in my couch just by asking someone to connect with their partner's higher self.
now, I think that's wonderful. What if that's not part of their vocabulary?
Well, that's a good point.
Mm.
Um, I mean, you could say maybe wiser part. It's
Why is it?
always,
Yeah,
yeah, the
yeah,
wiser part of you.
yeah. The one hypnotherapist years ago said, well, you know, some call it higher self, some call it, the wisdom of the ages, the akashic records.
Hmm.
Hypnotherapists call it your deep unconscious wisdom.
What about you could connect to somebody's essence, like that, just kind of the part of themselves that remains throughout
Yeah,
throughout all the time. Yeah.
yeah, and sort of, I will feel out with my clients, how to couch that to get to a place where I say, you have a personality.
Hmm.
We all have personalities, and they're
And
an
we need
accumulation.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're an or your ego is a construct of different opinions and attitudes and beliefs and characteristics that you kind of connect with for yourself. And underneath that,
Yeah.
there's a part of you that is timeless and immortal, and was here before the personality, and will be here after.
You know,
Yeah,
I think that that's what's so appealing about sound. Let's see if this my mic will handle it.
dueling forks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah. The
that's
sound.
like well that's like the timeless thing. It connects us to something that's true, and I think it helps people to go into a more open space because it's so safe. It's not like you are putting anything on that. That's something that's totally open for them
It's
to
very
be in.
ancient. It's very ancient. I would dare say it resonates on a genetic
Hmm.
level, pre-verbal. Uh, uh, every culture throughout history, mothers instinctively hold their babies and they hum to them,
Hmm.
right? And there are
Yeah.
certain melodies that actually ethnomusicologists have shown the same intervals show up in Africa and in Mongolia and in the Yukon. It's just amazing that there are basic melodies that thread through lullabies from every culture. So
Hmm.
there's something in. those relationship of those sounds to each other that keys into feeling states.
Yeah.
And right, and that's a great area of study and mystery for me. um, I'm interested in the science part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also for me, like as I said, it's a spiritual art form.
Yeah.
So I want to be, relating to it as there's a certain artistry. And
Mm-hmm.
when an artist is creating, I don't think they're when they're painting, they're not thinking of, maybe they are, but I don't think they're thinking of the formula for the pigments that go into the paint that they're using.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably just looking at a color and think and feeling like, oh, that goes here, and then this shape would go there. So it's an intuitive, more of a right brain kind of thing. And I do my best work at this point when I don't really know what I'm going to say next.
Yeah.
Right? It's I trust my I I'm telling my clients, trust your unconscious. And I
Mm-hmm.
need to also take that advice myself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that I also do that, and I like to heap on lots of even praise to the subconscious, even if it has been maybe generating this problem that they've brought in today. It always has a reason that makes sense to it, and usually it does fit in with something about it's trying to help in some way. There's some internal
agreed.
motivation. So if we just say that that's okay and we're all on the same team, then that allows that part of them to feel safe. And then that's what allows it to have the space to move and change and grow and learn.
To quote you earlier, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So here's a picture of me and that little guy.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
when he
oh my
was
goodness.
saying, help me, I need help.
Yeah.
How can you say no, right? Of course. So the my journey, from being a musician and being fascinated with sounds, and I came across an article that I wrote for a local publication in 1974,
Mm-hmm.
um, on sound and music as sadhana. Sadhana is the Sanskrit word for your spiritual practice.
Okay.
So at that point, I was already thinking about using sound and how important it was in my spiritual practice. And it wasn't until 10 years later that I was introduced to the words Ericksonian hypnosis and neuro linguistic programming.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, they were separate bins for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But sooner or later, I realized, what was my fascination with different types of music, whether it was African drumming, Tibetan Buddhist chanting,
Mm-hmm.
gamelan music of Indonesia, Appalachian high lonesome sound, bagpipes. What was the connection? And when I learned about hypnosis and hypnotic trance, I was like, aha, that's the unifying thread. All of these different sounds help me get into a trance.
Mm-hmm.
They are they are conducive to, for me, entering into an expanded, altered state of consciousness. So as soon as I realized that, then I became a missionary, and
Mm-hmm.
I started going to the National Guild of Hypnotists conference in 1990
Mm-hmm.
or 91. It was the first year that I went, and I have a little cassette tape of the presentation I did, which was sound and music for your hypnosis practice. So
Nice.
so I already was saying these people learn scripts,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they put on some background music, but they really don't understand how to use sound and music as an integral part of their both inducing and supporting trance. And so that became my identity after a while. I was the guy at the conferences with the drum or with the singing bowls and
Yeah.
singing forks, right? So and the whole field of what is now called sound healing did not
Mm.
exist. I mean,
Yeah.
that word didn't exist. There were people playing meditation type of music,
Hmm.
but the idea of sound healing, that word and that concept, was not around. And then
Hmm.
it became more and more, and now it's gigantic. It's mushroom.
Pretty mainstream. Yeah.
It's all over the place, right? So now I'm going the other way. I crossed the street one way. Now I'm crossing the street the other way and going to sound healing trainings and saying, you better learn about hypnosis
Yeah.
because
Good.
when you do these things, your clients are going into trance
Yeah.
when you make these sounds for them. And so
Hmm.
you better learn about it so that you can, whether you're a massage practitioner who's, I, somatic inductions,
Hmm.
anyone, as soon as you start touching somebody with intention in a certain way, chances are they'll go into a trance state. They'll change state, right? So
Totally.
massage therapy, right? Yeah.
I'm just giggling because the last massage I had, I could totally experience the spirit of marijuana through that massage therapist.
Oh, interesting. Uh, uh,
she,
whose was it? The massage practitioner who had?
yeah, she must have
Who
had
was,
some. I don't
oh
know.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was feeling it, man. I
yeah.
was like,
Well, it's a cheap high.
hmm?
It's a cheap high. If you
Yeah,
don't need to, you can get a contact high off of somebody else.
yeah.
Um, interesting story. My mentor, who was a brilliant hypnotherapist, Richard Zarrow,
Hmm.
was no longer with us, but he took me under his wing and trained me. And he had been a student of John Grinder, who was one of the founders of NLP, and he'd
Hmm.
spent time training with Grinder. And Richard was very enamored of the work of Carlos Castaneda.
Hmm.
Carlos Castaneda and the teachings of Don Juan, a Yaqui way of knowledge, a separate reality. Don Castaneda went down to Mexico to study with this bruja, this witch wizard, and he kind of went native and was initiated by Don Juan into these various states, and many of them involved the ingestion of cactus or teas or plant medicine.
Hmm.
And Richard apparently in his class was always talking about this, brought it up a lot. So at the end of the training, Grinder gave every person in class an assignment, a personal assignment. And he said to Richard, your assignment is to recreate every experience that Castaneda wrote about in his books without the use of substances,
Wow.
using hypnosis.
Wow.
Well, it was a challenge. I mean, if it is all mind, as many great mystics have said, right?
Hmm.
All our perceptual reality is
Hmm.
not out there, it's in here.
Oh, totally. I would
Right.
totally 100% agree with
Yeah.
that.
So, how does one begin to alter the neurochemistry and the brainwave frequencies that are our state of consciousness without, I mean, not that there's anything wrong per se with, I did my share of it, I don't anymore, but, and I have many people who are involved in the plant medicine ceremonies, and I think it's legitimate, but, it's also interesting to say there are many
Well,
paths.
yeah, I do think that there's a lot of value in considering that because plant medicines are not for everyone. I will be the first to say. I think that
Well, you just gave a
they
presentation on it, right?
yeah, they are for some people and not for others. And then but I do think that there's a lot of value that they can bring in the way that they open people's minds and to teach. I think that they have teachings to give to us. But I also think that people, especially when you kind of like open up your mind in a certain way, probably in a similar way to how you help people open their minds with music.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in fact, yeah, my dad told me one day I saw my dad after I had done a ceremony. He did not know this, by the way, but I was sitting on the front porch with my dad, and he just said, he said, you know, when I'm playing in the symphony, it's almost like a ceremony. It opens, I'm listening to everyone around me. I'm doing circular breathing because I'm playing the trombone, and there's a spiritual experience that I get when I'm playing in the symphony. And I just thought that was so interesting. I think that he was in tune with me. He didn't
Yeah,
necessarily know, but he kind of knew.
yeah,
And
we
so
know
he was
when, even
able
though
to
we
just,
don't know, we know, especially blood
yeah.
family, immediate family. Yeah, yeah, they
Mhm.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that is also an example of how someone could share the experience without necessarily having to ingest the plant medicine too. You know, he was able to connect with it on some level.
yeah. Being a survivor of the 60s and 70s, um, proud. Baba Ramdas was a big influence on many of us. Richard Alpert, who
Mhm,
was, a colleague of Tim Leary's at Harvard with the early LSD experiments. And he heard that there were these people in India, these yogis and saints who were, had these exalted states of consciousness that he had touched upon with his psychedelic explorations. So he went over in search,
mhm,
like Gurdjieff would say, in search of the miraculous. He was looking for uh, meetings with remarkable men. There,
mhm,
now I've just named both of Gurdjieff's books, and or one was Ouspensky. Anyway, he went and he met this little old man in the jungle who
mhm,
was became his guru, Maharaji. And Maharaji knew stuff about him that Alpert said, I don't know how he could have known that. He
mhm,
just met me and he sat with me and he said, oh, you're worried about your mother. She's in California. She's very sick. And he
mhm,
just started weeping, because when somebody sees you, that
mhm.
breaks down the ego.
Yeah.
And so he was very touched and he started, he was impressed and he wanted to know more. So he was spending time and his guru was very curious. He'd heard about what, and his name became Baba Ramdas. So I'll refer to him. He took that name. So Ramdas, Maharaji had heard about what Ramdas was doing with psychedelics.
Mhm,
And he said, I want to know about this.
mhm,
And so Ramdas gave him a very small amount of LSD. And he said, nothing seemed to happen. And he said, more, more. So he gave him more. And again, nothing happened. So finally,
wow.
he gave him a huge amount. And then his guru started acting all wacky and hiding behind his blanket, making weird faces. And he was, had remorse. He thought, oh, maybe, this poor old man. And then his teacher started laughing. He was messing with it. And he
Yeah.
said, yogis have known about this medicine for a long time.
Mhm.
And it's okay to take occasionally in a cool place. He said it allows you to visit Jesus, but you can't stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then,
Yeah,
there's that
I
thing
just
again. We go ahead.
I do think, I mean, and that kind of like also encapsulates some of my thoughts about psychedelics too. Is I don't think they're a panacea for anything. I don't think that they're unqualified good or good for mental health. I think that they could be used in a beneficial way, or they could be used in a recreational way, or they could be used in a detrimental way. And I think that they could be very ungrounding in certain circumstances. So I
True,
think that
true. Yeah. Human
yeah.
beings have the capacity to abuse just about anything.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it's much harder to abuse these.
Yeah.
Right? So, I work with different instruments. I have this little turtle ocarina here. You see, very beautiful.
Uh,
Yeah, and um, I he has. I play just a little bit. He has a particularly I think it's a kind of mournful sound, but maybe
Mhm.
other people would hear it differently.
I love
Right?
that.
It's pretty, right? Very pretty, very haunting, very evocative.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I might have my drum here, and on my entry form, when people come to see me, it says, please check all categories pertaining to you. And we have the usual ones, stress management, increased confidence, pain management, smoking cessation, weight loss slash management, phobia release. But I also have, shamanic journeying, and
Nice.
yeah, and or sound healing. And people say, "Oh, I've heard about that. My friend was telling me that you do that too." I say, "Yeah," and if that's something that you're interested in exploring, we can do that, and actually might be helpful for you on the other areas that you're working on. But it's totally up to you. It's just it's good to have it there as a possibility.
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful. Might consider it. Might consider it for my own intake form. What kinds of sounds would you like to hear during your session today?
Yeah, yeah, for
what
sure.
what kind
Yeah.
of sounds? What kinds of things could we play with today?
Well, I have a
Uh,
lot of props. I have
yeah.
some sound making props. Like I
Hmm.
have the duck here. When people are saying, I say, there's a lot of myths about and false ideas about hypnosis that you're gonna like bark like a dog or quack like a duck. And I say that's only one client that I was never able to get back and stop quacking after I made. So we can joke around about that, but sound, um, people make a connection. It anchors it into the neurology in a different way. And I
Hmm.
encourage my students play with your voice as a musical instrument.
Hmm.
Don't there's a stereotypical idea about the hypnotherapist who's always delivering things in a kind of a monotone and the hypnotic voice. And no, I
You
mean,
could bore your client into hypnosis, but there are better
well, yes,
ways.
you could. Erickson said, if all else fails, I bore them into trance. But I
Mhm.
want to go back to something you said earlier, that I meant to comment on. Uh, I obviously, or maybe not so obviously, was very influenced by Milton Erickson, and I always use the uh, presuppositions of an Ericksonian approach as a foundation. And the first one is you have an unconscious. I mean,
Mhm.
that may seem obvious, but
Mhm.
for a lot of our clients, we have to really, there's a part of you that makes way more, the vast majority of choices and decisions, and
Yeah.
that's your unconscious, right? So you
Mhm.
have an unconscious. And secondly, it is autonomous. It
Right.
operates pretty much on its own. It's benevolent. And I think
Mhm.
that's very important. You said that. It really wants good things for us. There's a whole, Freudian, the unconscious is a big snake pit filled with all
It
kinds of
used to
things.
be
That used to
characterized
be
very negatively,
right.
and
But
so,
yeah,
yeah, we have to trust that it has positive intentions.
yeah, it is benevolent and autonomous, benevolent, um, somewhat random at times,
Mhm.
and often quite literal.
Mhm.
So those are just things to communicate to the client that why you are doing a certain thing. Your unconscious may have taken something that was spoken metaphorically, very literally,
Oh, totally.
right?
Yeah, I had a child that came in, his mother had I regressed him to the point where this thing started, where he was afraid of bugs, and it was when his mother told him that the bugs could smell his fear. So now he's got a fear anger with bugs. Every time he sees a bug, he feels afraid.
Yeah.
So that was taking it. It was just his subconscious took that very literally, literally.
Yeah.
So we just changed it. We just said when I feel safe, the bugs feel safe.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Linking, right? And then empowering that it's not something that you have no control over. It's really something you do have some control over. So
Mhm.
I attend a bunch of hypnosis conferences, as you do, right? You attend a number of them, and I'm usually being asked to submit proposals to present,
Mhm.
and I get tired of the same themes that I've been doing for years. I mean, people are interested in them, but I want to do something different. I
Yeah.
want to keep it green for myself. I want to like, well, what else? Like one time, some years ago, I did one called "What's So Good About Goodbye,"
Mhm.
which was grief, loss, abandonment, using
Yeah.
hypnosis to deal with those things, right? And recently, I did one called "1, 2, 3," which is my formula, which is have fun, help people, make money. Right. So that was like, my what I can pass on to other hypnotherapists, what works for me. So now I was thinking, because I spent some time in attending 12-step meetings at one point in my life. I haven't for a while, but it was important and helpful for me at a certain point. So I was thinking the serenity prayer for hypnotists,
Oh, I love that.
right? That we, in our own work and in our work with our clients, it's good to be realistic. Like, what is it that I can't change, that I can have serenity around the fact that I really
Yeah.
can't change the fact that my hair is getting thinner. You know, I can't change the fact that it's going to pour later on today.
Right.
So
There are some
those,
things. I mean, I've brought that in when appropriate. If somebody says that that's okay with them, I've brought that into sessions myself, even for things like somebody is having almost like physical symptoms of IBS because they can't control how much work their work is giving them and they can't keep up with work.
right,
And I'm just like, well, you know what? There's like, you can only do what you can do. What else are you going to do? So,
right, yeah. So I think everybody knows this little prayer at this point.
mhm,
And some people said, if you're not feel comfortable with the G word, you don't have to use that.
mhm,
People just say, grant me the
mhm.
serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the strength to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
That's huge, because sometimes people are just running into walls.
Mhm.
You know,
Also another thing I mean, I don't even know. Sometimes I think I'd like to write a book about what healing really means, but you know, there are some things that we can change and there are some things that are just inherent qualities of ourselves that we have to accept. We have to learn to love and we have like some things and I don't even know. I mean like I also have like the lens of astrology that I play with, and I think about that as kind of a metaphor for how we have certain things in this lifetime just that we are
yeah,
exploring or intending to experience. And it's not that we don't have a choice about them, but it is sort of like that we have committed to them at some level. And so, and
yeah,
then our choice comes in around how we engage with them.
yeah. Word.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big revelation for me when I was quite young. A friend of mine brought me, I wasn't even 20 yet, and he took me someplace where there was a giant computer, in Grand Central Station in New York, and you could get a printout of your birth chart,
Mhm.
and uh, that set me to trying to figure out and learn more and more about astrology and go to different people and get readings over the years and look at my chart and look at my kids' charts and, my partners and my friends' charts and try to figure it out. And, it's another grid. It's another template.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I have, for instance, 5 planets in the 9th house. So that's a house of long journeys and spiritual aspirations.
I
That's
love that.
it's a
Yeah.
big chunk there. So I love traveling all my life. I've
Mhm.
always, yeah, it's one of the things I do. I love it.
I have 5, I think 5, 4 or 5 in my 5th house, but
Mm.
it's Sagittarius, which I believe correlates to the 9th
Yes,
house.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sagittarius rules the 9th house. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another thing, the wise person is master of their stars. The fool is ruled by them. That's a saying I heard a while ago, So again, it's a hand, like you use another metaphor, it's the hand of cards you dealt. How
Yeah.
you play them, right, is up to you. Um,
Exactly. It's just I think of it as like a kaleidoscope almost. It's like something that you could just use to look at something.
oh, as long as it's not an ulcerative kaleidoscope.
No, not an ulcerative
What?
kaleidoscope.
No, I heard it when you said
That's gonna be my new
kaleidoscope. I heard
insult. I'm going to call people.
kaleidoscope.
Yeah, it is ulcerative
Oh,
kaleidoscope.
I hear funny. I hear funny.
I love
I
it.
hear, words come across
No,
when I hear them, and they
I do
come,
that too. People will be talking to me and I'll
yeah,
hear something that they totally didn't say. And I'm like,
yeah,
was that my imagination or my intuition or my spirit guides? I don't know.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. Well, so I know we only have a few minutes left,
yeah.
right?
So why
And
don't you put, do you have, you tell people about your book
oh, my book. Well,
if you have it or if you
okay,
want to.
yeah. Well, all right. You posted the picture. It's called
I'll post a picture.
Transonics, and I wrote this book about 3-4 years ago. And you got an early copy. I have to send you a PDF of the last 2 chapters that I added in
Okay.
afterwards. But
Okay.
it was and the subtitle is the vital link between hypnosis and sound healing. So
Nice.
it's my stories, a lot of them, because I'm a storyteller. So a lot of them are stories about different people that teachers, mentors of mine, how I learned from them. It's a good way of burying, or not burying, but how to transmit information without it being didactic and pedantic, as you tell a story.
Yeah.
But speaking of which, I did want to mention, I don't know where your viewing and listening audience is, but if anyone is anywhere in the New York State area, which is where I am, I live in, by the way, the most famous small town in the world, Woodstock, New York,
Nice.
where the festival wasn't, and but everyone thinks it was. And once or twice a year, I bring a fellow that I think very, very highly of, who's been a mentor and friend of mine for about 30 years, Dr. Louis Mel Madrona, and his wife, Barb Mangai. And they will be coming down from Maine this coming Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And we're going to do 4-day coyote healing camp.
Wow.
Yeah, with all kinds of activities. And one of the things that we addressed in the blurb is we're going to be looking at what is healing. Like you said, you wanted to thinking writing, but what is that? Sometimes people are not cured, but they're healed.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're healed but not cured.
Right.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Or they're whatever. So emotional, spiritual, and one of the main themes, because Lewis is a psychiatrist, but he's of Lakota and Cherokee heritage. So he's studied with a lot of elders, and he brings in an indigenous perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, from an indigenous point of view, sickness and imbalance happen in isolation, and healing happens in community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, especially the last couple years with COVID, and people have been so isolated.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
and you know, it's great going back again, connecting, going to these conferences and seeing people live in
Yeah.
person. And so I feel that's very important. And so if anyone's more interested in finding out about that, you can find me through my website, soundsforhealing.com, and there's a phone or a link to email me there. And yeah, I cover half of everything, but we covered part of something.
Yeah, I will put your links, soundsforhealing.com. I'll link your book from wherever you're selling it to. I'll make sure to
Yeah,
put the links in
it's
the
on the
YouTube.
website.
Yeah, and
Yes.
so yeah, I know
Yeah.
you've got a session now, so I just want to thank you so much for coming and joining me today. This was a lovely conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime. All right. And I'll see you in Chicago.
Yeah, see you soon.
Right?
Mid America
All
Hypnosis
right.
Conference, folks. Come see
Right.
us there in October, mid October, third weekend, right?
Bingo.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, third weekend of
Okay.
October. All right, good day, everyone. Thank you all for joining.